All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Authors Impact Hub podcast. So I've been having some amazing authors join for some author Q&A, and I'm super excited about the author that we have on tonight. So I always let everybody do their own introduction, but I want to say I appreciate you, Apostle Verenda, for joining us tonight. We have only known each other for less than a year. I'll just say that. So less than a year, and the impact and the connection has been phenomenal. So I can't wait to see what happens next. But I will let you, if you can, introduce yourself and tell us the title of your book or books that we'll be talking about.
Yeah, hello, and thank you for having me today. For everyone that's just hearing my voice for the first time, I am Verenda K. Cobbs. I'm a founder and visionary and an author, a life coach, and I specialize in resiliency and helping people to really build their lives after experiencing transition, trials, tribulation, and trauma. I have been a social worker for the past 20 plus years. Won't say too much to give away my age. And through that experience, I have become very passionate about helping people to really move from a place of being stuck and stagnant into a place where they can be healed, but also whole and walk in their purpose. And so excited to be the visionary of Arise Kingdom Ministries, which also includes our women's outreach arm, which is Arise Kingdom Queens Fellowship. If you see that bright pink, you know you're in the right place. And then also to be a multiple author. I'm losing count each day, Juanita, but I think I'm at 13 now. I've written 13 books or been a part of a few different projects as well. And so today I kind of want to talk more about the book I'm calling like my baby, which is the Queens Chronicles. It was inspired during the pandemic. And so I'm just excited to be able to share about that. It's a letter to my sister Queens, part one. And I've been able to work as a visionary author for that project, bringing women together all over the US to share their stories of resilience and to talk about overcoming trauma, trials, transition, and tribulation. And so, yeah, thank you for having me today.
Yes, awesome. Well, I can't wait to learn more about your journey and then also more about your book and future projects that you're working on. So, if you can tell us a little bit about what inspired you to start writing and how did your faith journey, your journey of faith, influence your writing?
Yeah, so for me, I started writing as a little girl. I was very quiet, believe it or not. I'm the opposite now. Very quiet and shy. And so I found like peace and just comfort in journaling and just writing stories and poems and things like that. Always had some type of book in my hand, reading and writing at the same time. And through that, probably around 2018, right after losing my grandmother, who was like one of the most important people of my life. After losing her, I found myself in a very lost place. And even as a woman of faith, through that time, I had started pastoring and just moving and shaking in ministry, was doing a lot of traveling and things like that. But after she passed away, it like crushed my world. And I needed a space where I could like express myself in a very clear way. I had been journaling and had been writing and, reading, but I never saw myself as like becoming an author up until losing her. So
Okay.
she passed in February of 2018. And my world kind of crumbled during that time. I now realize that God was using it to build me into the person I am today. But I had spoken to a powerful woman of God who had been an author as well. And I just asked her, like, how can I become an author? Like, I'm interested in writing. And she shared some tips with me. And during that kind of like fall season, I had issued a activity for my mentorship program, and it was a group of girls who were like high school, college age, and I had shared with them for the next 7 days, we're preparing for Thanksgiving. Like, don't ask God for anything, just thank Him. And
Yes.
so when I started that, sis, God said to me, I want you to write like formally write and type up your 7 day journey of gratitude. And so that became my first book.
Yeah.
And when I published the book, God really spoke to me about living. And even though I had experienced this, massive grief and loss, there were other family members that passed away during that time, during that year. He said to me, "You're still here and there's still more purpose for you." So that book like saved my life in a sense, because it gave me, and it's the first time I ever like verbalized it like this, but it really gave me hope, because there were so many people that were impacted after I did my releases. I've
Yeah.
had 2 or 3 release events, and there were people coming from all over the United States, like, "Oh my gosh, that book really blessed me." Women talking about they carrying in their purse and they read it again. And it really gave me this idea that, wow, I could use writing, which I've always loved, as an opportunity for my own therapy, but also to create something that people can be inspired by. And it kept me going, literally. And I say keep going all the time, but that was where I got that keep going from, because I had lost hope, but I found it again through writing and through God. I thank Him for that. So, yeah.
Definitely. I know sometimes those uncomfortable seasons, it's like where you don't want to keep going, but honestly, like that's where the resilience, if you keep going, you'll see that God is like shifting you. You'll see your purpose start to prosper for real in those uncomfortable seasons. So I get that. Yes. So I love that. So you took your 7 days of gratitude and that became your first official published book.
Mhm.
Right. So then now we are on Queens Chronicles. So what number is this, the Queens Chronicle?
Queens Chronicles is book 12. It's book 12.
That that shows you like how far you have come. When you see like the one that we're talking about today, what number that is, it sees how far you have come in your writing journey. So what was your experience like in writing that book?
So I will share with you that, I'm an apostolic leader. And during the pandemic, I was speaking to one of my brothers in Christ, and we are talking about, my first book. And he was also an author as well. And we were in this conversation. I had shared with him just some ideas that I had as I was doing like Zoom sessions with women during the pandemic. And I saw that women were suffering and just really having a hard time, really didn't have like an outlet. And we began to talk. And so I kind of shared the idea I had about a book. I didn't go into a lot of depth, but a prophetic word was released to me that I would have a purple book that would impact women all over the world. And it would be a bestseller, and it would, have all of these different accolades connected to it. And so I kind of held on to that. That was in like 2020. I kind of held on to that and just kind of kept it close. And then in 2023, end of 2022, the Lord started speaking to me about it again. Like, okay, this book, it kept coming back up. Then I'm like, okay, Lord, what is this? So I tried to gather a group of women together. Epic fail. That did not work, right? And so I hit pause on it. The Lord said, "You're moving too fast. This is not the group. This is not what I want you to do. I want you to stop." And so then He released me in 2023 to go forth, and He set all of the pieces together. And I said, "Well, Lord, what is this going to look like?" And He said, "It's going to be an anthology project with a group of women." He gave me a number, and He had given me the number 9. And I'm like, okay, that works. And so I'm like, well, who are these women? And so the Lord was like, told me a series of steps to kind of go about to gather this group of women together, and then also who to connect with to help us publish. And He kind of started moving the pieces around. I had no idea that He was going to set me in place to be author 10. And so like during the writing process, it was literally like so challenging. I probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, because it wasn't just me helping women heal and bringing them into a space, but it was also me having to heal and deal with some real challenges that I had kind of pushed down. Um, and so when we got to the very end of the process, after like several different challenges, the Spirit of the Lord told me that I could not go forward to publish the book until I wrote some of my own story.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, "God, are you serious?" And so He like dragged the process out literally so that I could actually finish. And once I finished writing my like chapter, which he told me to put last. He spoke to me about the last being first and the first being last, and also just some pieces to add in to make the book flow, having prayers, opening and closing, and just some different dynamics to kind of put in to make it like inspiring. But it really was like having a baby, even though I don't have any kids yet. It was like giving birth, because it took about 9 months to really get us to the place where the book could actually be like done. And
Yeah.
there's still some things that I'm, polishing now to kind of do a relaunch of the project later this year. But it has been like such a powerful and life-changing experience, and just to watch the impact that that book has had on the other authors has been powerful. I could go into more detail, but it's been something, and it's still more. We're still working through some of those pieces that are a part of the vision. So very powerful.
Yes, definitely. And I love that, because you thought that you were just going to be pushing them to write their story, but God was like, nope, you need to share yours too. And I think that encourages the other authors as well. When they see you go through the process, if they see you go through it, they're like, I can do it
Mhm.
too. After this book is done, I'll be able to go and I'll be able to continue writing. So I love that. So what advice would you give to an aspiring author who wants to share their personal experiences but might be hesitant on how to start or where to start?
I have to give this tip because I share it often. Write every day. Um, and don't worry about grammar, don't worry about punctuation, don't worry about, anything but just getting thoughts out on paper or on your laptop or tablet. Because what I've found is that when I encourage people to write every day, they realize that they have this unique story, but there's also this other element of creativity that comes in that we don't always explore until we actually take the time. And so, what has happened through me writing every day, right? I have been able to see so much that I had on the inside of me that I didn't even really consider to be gifts. Um, creating worksheets and being able to like write workbooks and journals and devotionals and actual books. You know what I'm saying? I know that we're talking about literary arts, and I'm talking about books, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
Um, grammar is totally off. But just being able to like get things out, it's therapeutic, it's transformational, but it also will help you to really figure out, is this something you're passionate about? And then you'll move forward into manuscript mode. Everyone that I have given that advice to say write every day has really discovered something within themselves that they may not have known if they actually wanted to become an author. Once they got everything out on paper, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a whole story here. Or, I'm passionate about poetry, or I'm passionate about short stories, or whatever that may look like. But writing every day is what's going to inspire you. And it becomes kind of addictive in a sense, because you're like, oh my gosh, I got to get to my journal. You know what I mean? I got to get back to this. And even for the class that I taught during the pandemic, Write Your Way Out, everybody in that class became an author
That's
except for
awesome.
one person. Everybody else became an author, and that person moved into editing. And so she helps authors, but it was like so powerful to have that experience and to be able to inspire people in that way. But write every day.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. And it gives you that time to yourself, right? We're always talking to people all day long, doing things all day long. So I think that those moments where you get to journal or just write, it gives you like that peace and quiet and silence that we sometimes don't get during the day. So that's a great way to not just practice the habit of writing, but also just to have some solace and some quiet, right? Yeah, so I know you have a growing, a beautiful community where you mentor, motivate, and inspire other women and men, but especially women. How do you guide them in finding their voice and telling their story?
No one has ever asked me that question. That's deep. I think for me, so I have to share it like this. I am a sister. I have two sisters who are younger than me. I am also a cousin, and there are a lot of women in my family. And I have quite a few god sisters. And so I just believe in being my authentic self and giving people permission to do the same. It's something that people have often misunderstood about me, but when you grew up in a family like I did, like my cousins, we're raised like siblings, and we spent a lot of time together. Our parents made sure that we had that time together, but I also spent a lot of time with my sisters growing up. And so family and connection is very natural to me. If you've ever like been around my family, nobody's a stranger to us. Like we just welcome people in and just very warm and fuzzy in that regard. And so I believe in creating that environment for other people. And it comes very natural, it's very genuine. It's just who I am, and I believe in like talking to people, even like the person who might be the introvert, helping them to feel comfortable and being able to find their unique voice. And so one thing that I believe in is that especially Black and brown women, a lot of times we've been taught to hate each other, we've been taught to compete. Society has created these barriers, and I believe in eliminating those barriers. And so a couple ways that I've done that is through mentorship, being able to mentor women and really just walking with them through life and walking with them through ministry and walking with them through their disappointments and just being a safe space so they can like share with a leader. A lot of times apostolic leaders are not very approachable or like warm and fuzzy, which I can understand that too. But being able to be that go-to person that somebody just has a question for, to say, hey, I have this idea, and not be judged, right? I think the second part is just fellowship, like believing in like the authenticity and power of friendship. I don't think that women have to be competitive and catty and dramatic and jealous. Like we could be so powerful if we came together, like to collaborate. But fellowship is the way you do that, because you just come together and it doesn't have to be dramatic. It can just be safe and chill and comfortable. And then I think the other part is friendship, authentic friendship, and creating connection with people. And it might look like collaboration, like what we do. You have your vision, I have mine, but we're helping to build each other up. It may look like just cheering the next person on, but without the jealousy piece. That's
Right.
the key thing. And that's something that emotional maturity teaches people, to
Yes.
not be jealous or compare or contrast when they're dealing with friendship. So I just believe in living that out. And I have had some stories, Chad, I could tell just about that experience, but just being able to be a big sister and to be a sister, like that's really my motive, with everything, and teaching other women how to do the same thing, to be their unique selves, and show up in the way that God will create them to show up.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's so important. Like we are stronger together. We can make a bigger impact when we come together. Like I really do believe that. And your gifts make room for you and my gifts make room for me. But I really do think that our gifts together, they make room for everybody. You know what I'm saying? So it's just there's no need to compete or be jealous. But like you said, emotional maturity is key. So there's a lot of times I wouldn't have even been a 10-time author if I wouldn't have collaborated with other people, right? There are a lot of words that would still be suppressed if I would not have collaborated with other people. So I love that that you have created this community and it's growing and we're able to pour into each other. So I'm a part of your community and you're a part of mine. So I appreciate that and all the things that I've learned and just from being connected to you. So I wanted to just share that. So I think this is a great segue into the next question. So how do you manage the balance between being transparent and protecting your personal boundaries when writing about sensitive or traumatic experiences?
That is really a powerful question. For me, anything. So let me take this back. I have had bad experiences with this. um, but I'm learning that, Revelations talks about we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And so one thing that I have learned is that when you no longer own your testimony, you have given it to God, right? Then you have the capacity and the ability to walk in freedom as you share it. And if someone utilizes it for a negative reason, it really is not your job to try to clear it up. Right. It's your job to show up in your full self, you know. And I have had people slander me after hearing my testimony. I've had people, you know, minimize me after hearing my testimony. And also kind of like judge me, if that makes sense. But because I'm free indeed, you know, you kind of take a licking and keep on ticking. And I've learned how to really discern the season or the assignment that I am in with someone. And so if I'm in a group setting and if I share something personal and I put it on my podcast, I could care less if you share it, la. If I'm in a mentorship relationship with someone and I share something, even in that regard, I'm like, okay, I'm releasing this because the Lord has released me to release it. But at the same time, if it's abused, then I have to set boundaries or release that person from having access to my gifts, right? But I think the other piece is, someone taught me a long time ago that when you are a woman and man of God, you don't have to protect yourself. You let God protect you and fight for you, right? And so I'm going through a season now where I've had to set boundaries and I've had to pull back, right? But in that space, also still the balance of, there are still people who very much need the transparency, and there are people who very much need, you know, the mentorship or the fellowship or the friendship. And so really discerning that and trusting God enough, but also trusting myself to know that even though like I have this history of trauma, that I still can have healthy relationships and still cultivate safe spaces and build those safe spaces for other people. And I'm at a place now where I'm going to say this, it might sound kind of strange, but we can't pick how we want God to use us. You know what I'm saying? And so when certain things have happened, I'm like, okay, God, I didn't expect to be used, but you use me, and I have peace about whatever the outcome looks like. And I'm even at a point where I don't feel like I have to defend myself or go back and chase down whatever has transpired. It has been positive. If my motive and heart was pure and sharing that transparent moment to try to inspire, there are usually more who need it than those who abuse it, if that makes sense. And so it's a constant balancing act, and something that, you know, I've heard you say before, accountability also has helped me too. You know, having mentorship myself, having, you know, apostolic leaders myself, and coaches and support that I can go to confide in when I am navigating certain situations that, you know, I might need that extra reinforcement to help me figure out how to set boundaries in an appropriate way, is very important as well, to kind of navigate those things. Because when you're in leadership, you're always going to have people that come around for different things, but you know, your purpose is your purpose. And so I'm walking in the fullness of that, and also discerning, sometimes we can overshare. And so knowing like, when the Holy Spirit is like, okay, no, cut that
Yeah.
right there. You
Yeah.
know, so yeah.
And I think it can be hard, especially if you're like a genuinely authentic person, right?
Yeah.
Like we are. I think I'm in a season where I'm even learning that myself. Um, and it's like I don't want to have a guard up with everybody, right? But you do have to have boundaries. You have to know God will send you the right people to help push you into your purpose, and they see your vision and you'll see them also pushing your vision too. So I think that's kind of the season where I'm in, where I'm learning like, okay, it's not mutual. You know what I mean? The push is not really mutual. So I'm learning like where to place the boundary in that. So I think that, you know, can kind of help when you're trying to set boundaries, when you're talking about things that are transparent, when you're building communities. Um, it can be hard. It can make you feel like you being your genuine self is not enough sometimes. So I get that.
Girl, that's a whole podcast session in itself. And it's something
Yeah.
that just came to mind when you were talking, sis. And so I work in community engagement. Like I work for a university, and one of the things that I do is I kind of help build strategic partnerships and relationships
Yeah.
with our university and different community partners and so forth, right? And we have this term that we use all the time, but it just came to my mind: mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't want to think like a businessy person when you're talking about your purpose, but in some aspects, sometimes it's important to use discernment as it relates to mutually beneficial. Is this adding value? Am I adding value? Are they adding value to my life to the point where I can bring them into my personal space? It's one thing if I'm doing business and we're doing a business space, right? But there are layers to that, what that space looks like. And I think, one thing I have learned the hard way is that everyone doesn't need access to every layer of your life. There are people, this is a word, my God. There are people who might need to be in the building, but they don't need to be in the room with you. And you might have opened the door for them to come in, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be sitting at the table with you at your desk in your office. Um, we know that from ministry, right? Because both of us have been in ministry and probably seen some stuff. But when it comes to that other aspect of being a creative and being somebody who's very gifted, I'm learning to kind of watch the fruit if there is a mutually beneficial situation happening, and when it's not, knowing when to say, okay, this has run its course and the assignment or the connection needs to shift. It doesn't mean that it has to be a cutoff, but it can definitely be a guarding or protecting your heart, Proverbs 4:23. Okay, I'm above all else, guard your heart, because out of it flows the issues of life. You don't need to know my issues and be in the room with me and whatever I have going on, good, bad, or whatever. But we can still kind of agree to kind of part ways in that space. I am in that space right now where
Yes.
pivoting is happening, and I'm really looking at what are mutually beneficial. And you can always tell if it is when you go through some type of trial. You
Yeah.
can tell where people really stand when you go through a trial, because anyone who is on the same page with you is going to be there to support. Anyone who's not, they're going to pivot and focus on their own individual interests. If you can't even say, hey, are you doing okay? Right, then that might not be adding value to me where I'm at in my life right now. And it's okay. I don't have to slander you if I disconnect. I don't have to be negative. I can still very much love and support you. But at the same time, I have to protect my purpose and what God is calling me to do. And that's something I have had to learn, especially as an apostolic leader, that's operating in ministry and marketplace. You got to kind of balance that out sometimes and look for those mutually beneficial connections. And everything is not for every season. Just because you had a powerful connection with somebody in one season doesn't necessarily mean that's supposed to follow you winter, spring, summer, fall.
Exactly. Yes, yes. And that's important, especially like when we think about writing, we think about publishing and editing, right? As an author, even like down to like graphic design, just the different layers of like connections, businesses that you have to work with to get your work out, you'll realize that like, okay, what was good for one project may not be the same for another project. And you have to sometimes have those tough conversations. But one thing you always want to do is lead and leave with grace. Right. I think that's very important, especially like as an up and coming author, when you're trying to build your platform and connections, like you don't want to be that person that people don't want to work with. You don't want to be that hard to work with person. So if I can give any advice to somebody that's listening and thinking about like, okay, I need to switch publishers, or I need to switch graphic designers, or because I didn't like X, Y, and Z, leave and lead with grace. I think that's very important. You want that to be the character that you have. So I love that we were able to talk about that. I think that's very, very important, right? So, what strategies do you use? Because I know you work with a lot of authors, women, and you are very supportive, purpose pusher. I love that about you. So, what strategies do you use to support other authors in your fellowship?
So one is I try to meet with people one-on-one to really identify what are their areas of focus, right? And 9 times out of 10, people have a story connected to their why of writing. And so whether it's domestic violence, or it is grief and loss, or it is confidence, or it is, navigating adversity, or just sharing their own personal kind of journey, really identifying that space first. And what I found is that people have a brand within a brand as they are becoming an author. And so I really try to work with women to encourage them to first build their personal brand and starting with self. And so one of the things that we did while we were walking with the women through Queens Chronicles is showing them how to utilize social media as a way to build their brand. And so talking about like your photos, your, you know, colors, your brand colors, you know, understanding what is the actual like kind of message that you have and being clear about that message. What is the name of your brand? Is it consistent across all platforms? You know, not God's leading lady here and then Verenda K Cobbs there, but just making sure that you have that consistency across your brand so that people can really take you seriously. And also I always ask the question, would you follow you? Right? Would you follow yourself? Are you inspired by yourself? You know what I'm saying? When you see your stuff and you like, oh my God, I definitely want to follow her. And just really helping people to understand that. And then something that's very unique about me as well is connecting people to people who have the gifts they need. Like for me, I am a resiliency life coach. I specialize in helping people overcome trauma, trial, tribulation, and transition. I'm not a publisher, right? That is not my area of expertise. I can do graphics, but I'm not a graphic designer. That is not my area of expertise. And so when I know that I don't have that gift and I'm not passionate about it, I connect people to people who have the gift, you know, and so that has helped me to also be able to influence other women because I'm teaching about the value and importance of community, you know, and handling women with grace as I'm doing that to say, hey, I have a really good friend that's a brand, you know, image consultant. Let me connect you to her. Or I have a, you know, brother that does this and you want to do t-shirts. Let me connect you to him. Right. And also sharing information about how to navigate and set up systems for themselves. I think is also important too. But not being a gatekeeper when it comes to info. Really trying to like coach and inspire people to actually like connect with others, but also showing them the way to go. And I think that's the apostolic part of me as well, like activating people, but then being okay with the fact that you might not walk them all the way through the door. You may just help to say, hey, this is go down the street, make a right here and then a left there. And then what you need is gonna be right there. Right. If you have questions, let me know. If you get lost, let me know. When you get to where you need to go, you ready to celebrate, let me know. I'll come celebrate with you. Right. So it's definitely unique and it frees me up because I'm like, I don't want to be all the things and wear all the hats. I know my lane and I'm gonna stick in there. You need prayer, I got you. you need you need to talk to somebody because you're having a meltdown, I got you. But I don't have to be the gatekeeper for all the different opportunities that can come. And just watching people soar, I think gives me so much.
Yes. Yes, I love that. And honestly, everything you said, like, that was the purpose of the Authors Impact Hub, right? There's other publishers in there, there's other author coaches in there, graphic designers, editors, authors. But I honestly think that we are so much stronger when we come together and we push other people. Now, how you choose to show up in that space is your responsibility, right? But just building that community where, like, hey, I can go to someone. Oh, she's a fashion designer. I know her. Oh, she can show you how to launch your podcast. Because, honey, I cannot. I don't have the time to do it right now. But I know that my sis, she will lead you in the right direction, right? So, like I said, just not gatekeeping. I think that is very important, right? And if I try to be all the things, I might drop it because I'm trying to juggle too much. But if I know somebody who is able to, and I trust their vision and I trust who they are and their character, I will send you to them. So I think I love that. I love that about your community and what you are building. Right. So we are getting close to the end of the podcast. So I did want to make sure we take some time out to give some advice. So what is a piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring author who is struggling with self-doubt when it comes to sharing their story?
Self-doubt. Can I transparently share with you, sis? This is one of my biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Um, as a resiliency life coach, giving up and having self-doubt is one of my biggest challenges. And so sometimes you can get in your head and you overthink, overplan, talk yourself in, talk yourself out, right? Of all of the different opportunities and the potential that you have. And the word of advice that I have for people is to be your own biggest cheerleader, but also to keep going through prayer. Like prayer has been what has helped me to renew my mind and to really understand like the bigger purpose of the why. Um, and when I feel like, oh my gosh, I can't, like I go to God in prayer, whether that looks like journaling and writing it out or, just talking to God, but I literally have to lay my heart before him because, one thing I will share is that a lot of my support system passed away, as I lost a lot of the different people in my life, including one of my best friends, including my grandmother, who was like my BFF. I talked to her about everything, including women who were like my go-to people. So now people are coming to me where I'm used to being able to go to these seasoned women of God and they'll pray over me and now I have to be that for others. And so one thing that has helped me is just to like keep going through prayer. Like when I get, uncertain about certain things, pray through it, navigate through it that way. But I think also I would just encourage people just to have someone who can hold you accountable. Um, because sometimes we can get in our head and talk ourselves out, which creates self-sabotage if we're not careful, right? But having somebody that can like hold you accountable to think in a positive way, I think is very important. My spiritual parents have definitely been that for me, to kind of push me when I feel like, oh my God, I can't do this. And I remember there was something I was working on and they were like, when are you going to do this? And I burst into tears. I was like, I don't want it to fail. I mean, and they were like, it's not going to fail. It's going to be okay. And in my mind, I had already told myself because it failed before, it was going to fail again. But they kind of showed me through just their affirmation that what I was thinking was not what was going to happen. Right. And that's what self-doubt does. It talks you out of your purpose. And that is the enemy all day. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Right. And I'm learning that having that accountability that has that voice of affirmation, but also that voice of support, it will also guide you and lead you in the right direction. And then if you're praying, you're going forward, but you keep going through prayer, it's going to keep you motivated and inspired. And then you show up and you cheer yourself along. You know what I'm saying? You thank God for what he's doing, but you also celebrate your accomplishments. So I've been doing reels or, just even today I went through the Queens Chronicles, like a lot of the pictures, the different people that have purchased the book. And I just created a reel like, wow, I have had a lot of support with this, so I got to keep pushing through, not just for myself, but also for the other women who are a part of the project. And as a visionary author, I have to go hard for what God has spoken and not just like cheer them along, which is my natural kind of thing. So this month, I'm all about pushing through with this particular book. Because like I said, this book, it really, it was a huge step for me to be transparent and share in a very unique way about some of the bullying that I've experienced in ministry and some of the challenges I've navigated, with just trying to show up for other women. And so I'm excited. I always say I'm proud of Verenda too, right?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Yes. And you should be, right? I always say small ones still move you forward. And if I could encourage anybody, it would be like, all right, you wrote the first chapter, celebrate that. You sent it to the editor, celebrate that. Your book cover is complete, celebrate that. Because it's so easy to, like you said, like that self-sabotage can sink in. And I think it's because we often wait for that final step, that final, like, okay, it's done before we celebrate.
Yeah.
And if it takes longer than what you were thinking it would take, you can start to think it will fail. Like, okay, this is never going to happen. But if you celebrate along the way, that'll help like boost your confidence and your morale as you're trying to accomplish your project. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. All right, sis. So please tell us, are there any upcoming projects that you're able to share with us?
Yeah. So I have been booked and busy.
Yes.
And have two anthologies that I'm going to be a part of in the next upcoming weeks, which I'm super excited about. One will be released in October called Unbound, which is actually my first time ever sharing about my story of overcoming domestic violence. And there are several women all over the US and also outside of the US that are a part of that project, with visionary author Tina Silver, who has just been a super blessing to my life. And then also, y'all, I'm going to be a part of Faith While Waiting with Coach Juanita Woodson as we kind of move forward to share with that group, that anthology project. And then last but not least, towards the end of this year, I will be pulling another group of women together for Queens Chronicles, A Letter to My Sister Queens Part 2.
Yes.
So we're going to be moving forward. I'm going to celebrate again with the first cohort, which I call every group a cohort. And then we will be praying with that second group and bringing those women on, and we'll be looking to release part 2 next year. And we had a book tour for the first one. We're going to do the same for the second one and just really go bigger and wider for this second book. But just really thankful for the opportunities that have come through. I've had a few like smaller projects that have been released as well. A few, planners. And so I want to convert some of the e-planners into actual planners that people can touch and feel. That'll be in the works as well. But I am pivoting with business. I have been doing some network marketing businesses and kind of deep into those. I have shut some of those projects down, some of those businesses down so that I can prioritize my author and speaker and coaching journey. And so just looking forward to digging deeper in that as the year kind of wraps up and leaning into some things that I'm extremely passionate about, but have had some self-doubt. So I'm pushing that out the way and showing up. And so being on this podcast is one step for me. Just putting myself out there again and going big and going hard for God. So yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm with you, pushing you, sis, as you do me. So I think I won't say it enough. I don't think that I can, but I appreciate your push. So I will make sure I do the same. All right. So please tell us, how can we connect with you on social media? How can women join your community? And then how can we purchase your books, right?
Yeah. So www.arisekingdom.org is the best way to get connected with me in all facets. And Arise is spelled with 2 A's, and it's a reason for that, which I have to share at a later time. But it stands for always achieving resilience in spite of everything, based off of Isaiah 60 verses 1 through 3. So that is our website for the ministry, which will lead you in a few other directions. And I am in the process of putting together my brand for Verenda K Cobbs. So that website will be coming out soon. That will give folks an opportunity to plug in. But in the meantime, I have Linktree, Verenda K Cobbs, and you can follow me on Facebook. I'm revamping my Instagram page right now, so that's down. And I'm also on TikTok. And so you can find me, author Verenda K Cobbs, on TikTok, Verenda K Cobbs on Facebook, and then stay tuned as I prepare to release my brand on some of the other platforms that are out here. Yeah, just going through some rebranding right now and excited about what God's about to do.
Yes, definitely. Well, I'm excited, and we'll make sure that we do share your contact information in the show notes. So I always like to end the show with one last question, right? So what impact do you want your books and your brand to make on the world?
My biggest inspiration is I want to help people who have been suffering in silence. And many of the people who suffer in silence the most show up every day, but you don't know that they're struggling internally and privately. And so my communities, Arise Kingdom Queens Fellowship, even I'm starting a Rise and Shine community, which is going to be like a email hub community. All of my communities really are catered to the person who's suffering in silence. And there are leaders who show up every day that are dealing with depression and anxiety. There are strong men and women of God that are dealing with grief and loss. There are, teenagers and young adults that are dealing with suicidal ideations. And I am called to the person who is suffering in silence, that may not always say that they're having a tough day, having a tough time, having self-doubt, want to quit, want to give up. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this podcast, I just want to encourage you to keep going. When I say that, that is a mantra for me that I speak every day of my life, but also it is the reminder that life, it could be life, but it's not over. Right. And so if you're there and you're suffering in silence, I just want to encourage you not to give up right here. And there are other people who need you, but your life matters and you are needed.
Yes, definitely. And I appreciate you ending the show with that. I think that is very important to share. So, listeners, please make sure that you do connect with Apostle Verenda on her social media platforms. Join her newsletter. I'm real big on a newsletter because when social media is down, there is still a way to connect with us, right? So I love that. I am your host, Juanita in Woodson. We definitely appreciate you tuning in for another episode of the Authors Impact Hub. Connect with us on Facebook and then also Instagram at the Authors Impact Hub. Stay tuned for our next episode. Please like, share, comment, leave a review. Take care.